So to that ends, I mean, obviously you're with IMAX now, but you come originally from the studio side, specifically Paramount. Can you give us some background on how you got into the entertainment industry, maybe your history with movies, with movie theaters, and how you came to be in this space?
Yeah. I started off in New York actually, and I was on the indie side of the business. I started off at Miramax after working for a couple of years as an investment banker. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, and then kind of looking at the fact that I would be facing years and years of being in debt from going to law school, and then I would potentially have to be going through these like piles of cases at an investment bank as a lawyer. I thought, oh my God, I'll be fired immediately. That's just not my skill set. And my husband was then boyfriend at the time had come to New York and was working for a film producer. And I was thinking about like the kinds of things that friends and, were doing that, if you find yourself being envious of somebody, then you should think about, what would make you happier or what would kind of spring you out of bed in the morning. And what I really wanted to do was work in documentary film. I was really drawn to that. And at the time, there was a lot of news magazine shows. I really wanted to work at 60 Minutes. But I found myself at Miramax, which was not too shabby. It was a very exciting time there. I was there from roughly 97 until 2000. And there was a real spate of just amazing movies and amazing experiences. And I met incredible people while working there and got some training ground in publicity. That's actually where I started off. And from there, I left and worked in politics for a little bit, was interested in what was going on with the 2000 election. And I was interested in media in general. And then I came back to film when I came to work at Fox Searchlight. And from there, I ended up moving from New York to Los Angeles and worked for Fox Searchlight. And then at the time, we had worked on movies like Garden State, Napoleon Dynamite, and 28 Days Later. And there was all these really exciting filmmakers and Alexander Payne and Danny Boyle. And, it was just such an exciting time in film. And Tom Freston was running Viacom and had said he wanted to take Paramount Classics and wanted to replicate the success of Searchlight. And, I wish I had like a more, iconic story, but I had bought a house a block from Paramount. And I really hated the commute to Fox. And I was also ambitious, and I could tell, everyone at Fox, I mean, honestly, there's people that work at Searchlight that are in the exact same positions here. I worked at Searchlight. I left Searchlight in like 2004, 2005, and like everybody's still in a lot of the same positions because it's a wonderful place to work and they're wonderful people. But I realized like that wasn't really for me. I was too restless for that. And so I knew I had to move on if there was an amazing opportunity. And so I really kept my eye on what was going on with Paramount and Paramount Classics and the conversion of that. And the day that John Lesher got his job, I had him kind of attacked in every direction from every single person I knew, saying that he had to hire me. And I was actually hired that day.
Oh, wow.
And it was in November. I wasn't allowed out of my contract till May 1st, and he waited for me, which was kind of amazing. But I was like working during the day on Thank You for Smoking. And I had one other movie left at Searchlight that I had to work on. But at night, I was doing the Inconvenient Truth campaign by myself because they bought it out of Sundance. And I was kind of doing it at night because there was no marketing or publicity department. And they wanted to release it in May with no staff, which was insane. I wasn't even starting till May 1st. But it was so fun. I look back on those years so fondly because it was all sort of exciting and insane. and it was a really fun time. And Paramount Vantage was a very exciting 2 years of my life. But it was a quick blip. You know, John got promoted up into the studio, uh, and there was a change at the very top. Tom Freston was out almost immediately. Philippe Dumond came in. There was less of an interest in kind of this Searchlight model, which is, you know, you get a lot of at bats. You're not making a ton of money on any of these movies, but every once in a while you really hit. And when you hit big. But you know, you have to kind of believe in that and believe in having this kind of farm team model. And Philippe was not about that, and looked at these P&Ls and thought, this is stupid. I'm not into this at all. And so was not as supportive of kind of fostering this strategy. And so Paramount Vantage was sort of quickly dissolved, and several of us moved up into the studio. And at that point, I had been running marketing at Vantage, and then I was moved up to run marketing for all of domestic at Paramount. And then the rest is kind of history. Things just kept kind of moving along at Paramount, and I had a lot of different positions while I was there.
I guess you must have overlapped with Pat and worked with Pat.
I did. I mean, that's really why I was there.
She's the best. I was just letting Heather know I'm lucky to have worked with you.
Yeah, Pat was a big highlight of working at Paramount, as anyone who's ever worked at Paramount can attest to. We had a lot of fun times, and I could tell 40 minutes of Pat stories.
Okay, that'll be an exhibition speaker series after dark.
Speaker series. The one time I heard Pat curse, that's a good story.
I know. I only curse like once a year.
Well, you save it up, so it's a good one, you know.
Yeah. If you make Pat mad, you should just arrest yourself and just, you know, send yourself away. It's very difficult to make her really, really angry. But if you ever see her really angry, it's super scary, because you're like, you know, you've done something very wrong.
I don't want to see it.
Yeah, you don't want to see it.
So
it wasn't, by the way.
Okay.
It was not.
So you had this background in Miramax, then Searchlight, then Vantage, the kind of more, I guess, like mini major mid-budget space. Now in IMAX, and there are like Earth Day documentaries, there are documentaries that play in IMAX. You know, there's a diverse variety of films, but it's mostly the big tentpole blockbusters that can sustain the big beautiful screen. You know, as the industry is kind of moving along and we're having these conversations about streaming, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts from the breadth of your own career on the theatrical future of maybe the middle films, you know, the mid-budget. They're not the Marvels or the Star Wars or the giant things.
Well, I think it really, you know, it's true if you're releasing Napoleon Dynamite, and it's true for releasing Transformers. You always have to make a movie an event for somebody. And that, you know, that phrase has been used a lot, but it is really true. And so, you know, when we were doing the Napoleon Dynamite campaign, we thought, what makes a comedy work? Well, often comedies don't work very well in theaters, because you have to see them 3, 4, 5 times. It's the repeat viewing that gets you to learn the lines and kind of think about how hilarious it is. And it becomes funnier and funnier, particularly a movie like that. So the word of mouth campaign that was designed, and really we worked so closely with exhibition to have a weekly Napoleon Dynamite screening program that I think was 12 weeks long, and you could win prizes for, you know, getting your card. Back in the day, there was no, you know, scanning your QR code. This was getting your card punched for coming each week, and
the coffee shop, yeah.
Exactly. But you know, you got your Vote for Pedro t-shirt, which ended up being a very coveted, you know, item. But it is that kind of feeling, what is the thing that kind of cracks making a movie iconic and special, and what makes being in the theater, even if I'm going for the first time, how does the person next to me inform my experience? And so I think sometimes that gets lost. And I think those of us who have worked kind of in the trenches and in a smaller way, know that. I think if like you've managed a small theater, you know better how to manage 300 theaters, like, because it's the detail of what you do to get that one theater perfectly right. And of course, when you're managing 300 theaters, maybe you can't put in the same level of time, energy, elbow grease that you can put into the big thing. But I think the truth of the essence and the truth of what you do is always remains to be true, which is what's special. And I think about that a lot. And I've been having those conversations with filmmakers as we're bringing movie theaters back to life in this post-pandemic era. I think one of the issues that we've faced, and I don't want to say that we've taken audience for granted. We make some amazing movies. There's a lot of time, energy, effort, money, people that go into making great movies. But when they're programmed and you kind of look up at the marquee and they're playing every 15 minutes and it's a 16-plex and it's Fast and Furious, Fast and Furious, Fast and Furious, Fast and Furious. Mm-hmm. And like, you're just trying to decide, like, do you want to have lunch now? Do you want to have lunch later? Do you want to wait 15 minutes? Do you want to go to that theater or that theater? And you're trying to discern between like the why this versus that. I think it's incumbent upon all of us, and particularly people who are creating content, to say, like, we have to surprise and delight people so that when they're sitting in the room, they're going, oh my God, I didn't realize we were getting a first look at Jurassic World, that like there's something else special that happens there, and that you go that like one extra mile, or you think about how to entertain people in ways that are surprising, interesting, and go to a different place. Because I think right now that is the challenge. And I think it's really thinking about the fandom of who's sitting there, who are they, and what do they most want, and what do they most need? Because if people leave and they say that experience was awesome, then this industry is going to remain extremely healthy. And I know firsthand there's many exhibitors out there that are spending a ton of time and energy on consumer surveys and spending a lot of time really focusing on the consumer. But I think that's kind of the key. It's like using those experiences to think about how to focus all of that energy.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just, you really have to think outside of the box. I feel like for a lot of people, or just the general kind of status quo in this industry, it's very like opening weekend. And then once F9 is out, okay, you focus on the next film. But like, you also have to think about the life of this movie further down the line, and how you can provide that audience experience when something's like a month old.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not so much in IMAX, because you have such high turnover.
We do. But I think, one of the things we talk about that we could do better, I think, is, I think this feeling that like movies are around forever, and like they'll exist forever. And I want to get to it. I mean to get to it. I'll go tomorrow. Oh, today, I meant to go today, but let's go tomorrow. Maybe we'll go next week. This idea that like time is finite and you'll miss an opportunity, and kind of playing into that idea that like time is running out, you're losing a chance to see something. We're playing a lot more with marketing into that kind of concept, which is like, this is your last 3 days to see this movie in this way. Because it's, for some movies in particular, it's a really special way to take in a movie. And if you have that intention, you need to get off your butt and go do it, and I think we're all guilty of that to some extent. But I think, that's the advantage that, a live concert has, that, you don't feel like you can do it later, the next day, some other time. There's an urgency to it. And so creating reasons why something is urgent, I think also is part of our job.
Yeah. Bring back FOMO. There's been no FOMO for a year because
Yeah.
there's been nothing to miss out on, but it's time to bring back FOMO.
Well, and I think we've dampened, to some extent, I do think we've dampened our willingness to dream. Like, we've had so many plans canceled and weddings moved and graduations that didn't happen and camps that didn't get off the ground. And, you know, like, there's so many things that we've been disappointed so much that I think we've almost like dampened our planning skills, you know, like we're just very much living in the moment. And so, you know, movies are a good way to like get back on the horse and get people to, you know, be in outer space and be in Europe. And
I can go do something after work. Like, I can have a movie and drinks after work with friends. Like, imagine.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So I want to ask you some more, you know, questions about your work with IMAX. But first, your title, your role in IMAX is President, IMAX Entertainment, and Executive Vice President, IMAX Corp. What exactly does that entail? Because IMAX Entertainment, IMAX Corp. Can you give us the rundown?
It's a very long title. It's a fairly unusual job because it does have a lot of buckets. One bucket is that I'm responsible for overseeing the slate, like making decisions about what movies are going to be in IMAX and how do we manage that slate. And on occasion, movies crash into each other. They crash into each other internationally when they're not going day and date. And you're kind of working out how the network is going to work and how you work out conflicts that occur in the network and kind of think about that. Some of it is we have a certified IMAX program where we have digital cameras, and it's something that I'm really passionate about because that comes from my experience working at Miramax at Paramount. Because you know, Greg would always call me and sort of say, "Oh, you know, can you get mission to shoot in IMAX?" And I'd say, "I don't understand. Like, these movies are all delivered in IMAX. Like, I don't get, like, what else do we get? Like, we're in IMAX, we come out in IMAX." And he's like, "But if there's more aspect ratio, and if you shoot it like this, and if you do that, like, then we're even more in." And I could never quantify. I put DPs on the phone, like we would talk about it, but I could never quantify what it meant. And I think part of that is, you know, concepts like expanded aspect ratio and 20 minutes or 40 minutes, or, you know, you could do this, you could do that. Like, it's all very confusing. It doesn't mean anything to a consumer. But when Endgame came out, it was shot with IMAX digital cameras, and that means something to a consumer. A consumer understands what it means to say that it's shot with IMAX cameras. And then the intention is there, and they understand a filmmaker crafted a movie with the scale and scope of the screen in mind. And so we're trying to be much more intentional about that piece of it. So some of it is using the relationships that I have with filmmakers and being really on the front end of production to be thinking about how to, with the right movies, really think about how to put the brand more on its front foot when it's appropriate about the digital film program. Obviously, there's also the film program, which is what Chris Nolan uses. It was also used in Bond, and that's a really cool, interesting program. We're looking at making more film cameras, which haven't been made in a really long time. That's a whole other thing. On the corporate side of things, you know, I sit on the board. We're incorporated in China. We have 1,500 screens around the world. We're in 81 countries, but China is our biggest footprint. We have over 600 screens in China, and I sit on the board of our corporation in China, and that is an important piece of the management of how things work. More and more thinking about local language. I mean, right now, not a single Hollywood movie has come out in China for all of the summer. There's a blackout period in July because of the centennial, but it may go through the rest of the summer. So how we engage with Chinese films and Chinese filmmakers is really important. During the pandemic, we set 2 records in Japan with local language titles. So it's a lot about local language titles too, and how that works. And then there's kind of the strategy and innovation piece of it, which is why it came to IMAX, because all of that sounds really cool and interesting. But to be honest, on some level, some of that is automatic because it's been really built up over the last 10 years. And it's interesting, but it's some of it is self-perpetuating. Filmmakers are very aware of all of it, and while we're sharpening messages, I think it is what it is. But I came to do some more innovative work around how we engage with consumers and how we think about innovating within our theaters, providing a lot of tools that didn't exist before for filmmakers and studios, and even thinking about how to broaden the entertainment experience in theaters. And so all of that is kind of being unveiled in the fall. And that's something we've been working on for the last 2 years. And so that's a lot of my passion and where a lot of my energy is going to.
I can't wait for more developments and the expansion of the theater experience. I mean, the next question, I mean, you might have actually answered this with the local content piece, but there are certain films that or like you pretty well know that they're going to do well in IMAX. Like F9 comes out and that's going to do well in premium formats compared to I don't know, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. In your time with IMAX, have there been, some hits that maybe surprised you? Or you were like, I didn't think this would work as well as it did, or attract consumers as much as it did for the big screen experience?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think that the world is becoming much more global. So, Demon Slayer, which set a record in Japan, was released here and did exceptionally well here. It was released, there was a conflict in dates. Mortal Kombat ended up sliding back. And so they released actually on top of each other, which was a little bit of a thing, so you couldn't quite see the pop of IMAX, although we did exceptionally well for the nights that we released Demon Slayer in IMAX. It was a really big deal. So I think thinking about kind of adult anime in IMAX that really draws a crowd, and that was a super well-respected movie, and there's a big audience for it. I think I'm really passionate, as I started the call off, about documentaries. And I think, when I first got here, we released Free Solo, and it's 12th
I saw
week.
Free Solo in IMAX. That would give me a heart attack. I'm almost glad I saw that one on a.
I gotta say, we still occasionally, when we're doing sort of show and tells to filmmakers or show and tells to artists or musicians, we throw that clip in. And if you just watch 5 minutes of it,
it's so that's it for this one. That's movie about a guy who climbs mountains without ropes of any sort.
Yeah, it is
you feel like that man's gonna die.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You find yourself, your heart rate is racing. You're starting to sweat, and you're like, I've seen it. He lives. Relax. It's fine. But it's an amazing experience. But I think that's the thing. I really believe in as exhibitors have developed incredible subscription packages and have really developed loyalty programs, I think that there is an avid moviegoer that is really, really thirsty for great documentary content. And so that's an area that we're really focusing on and doubling down on. That's another area that I oversee. And so we had always been kind of in the 40-minute space and thinking about our institutional museum theaters, which are super important to us and something I care a lot about. But I think also having a 90-minute version of these same films that are commercial, that people can take in. And I think, whether it's, space, or you're thinking about adventure, Apollo 11 was a really great example. It's an extraordinary movie to see in IMAX. There's a lot of opportunity there, I think. And it's something we're looking at.
Oh, someone says, ask about the Kanye. Oh, did Kanye have an IMAX movie?
Kanye did have an IMAX movie. It wasn't a movie as much. It was more of an experience. It ended up being a 40-minute piece. It was very cool. We were working with him, and he was. It's a piece that we still may do something else with, because it was shot at the Rodin Crater, which is it's a super interesting art installation, like an hour outside of Flagstaff. It is not open to the public. It is a beautiful, it's as if sculpture was built underground, and you can kind of walk through it, except there's been like, you know, a handful of people who have ever walked through it, and they're really patrons. Like, if you're going to give $20 million to this artist, then you can walk through it. And he's building these sculptures underground in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And Kanye, of course, was one of the patrons, helped to revitalize the project when the project went dormant. And so he gave him access to it to shoot this piece and basically take the Sunday service into one of the pieces at the Rodin Crater. And so it's such a cool thing, and it's gospel music. So it's sort of an evergreen piece. It's not like it is named Jesus is King, which his album was also named, but it's not really tied to the album. There's one song from the album on the piece, but it's cool. It's just music.
Yeah. I mean, I have to ask you something about this. It's obviously it's the elephant in the room for any exhibition conversation. We've seen the streaming windows shrink. We've seen kind of the status quo between exhibitors and distributors shift over the last year and a half. Kind of seems like we're stabilizing in terms of what's happening with windows a little bit. What role, if any, does IMAX play in that conversation? Because, you know, I guess the typical perception is that like, oh, IMAX only does like the big gigantic stuff that would like, they'd never just do day and date, or they'd never push to Netflix, but like you have pretty diverse programming. So that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'll say this. I think first and foremost, like, exhibitors are our partners. And so we care a lot that there is a really healthy ecosystem, and we never want to see fundamentally a business model take hold that we think is actively harmful to the theatrical movie-going experience. So like that is our position, and we're pretty active in having those conversations and being on the front lines of those conversations. So I think there was a lot of kind of pandemic experimentation, and there was an opportunity to stand up other businesses and take advantage of you know, needing to try and get some businesses some attention and get some subscriptions, you know, aligned. And we also were really craving content. And the fact of the matter is, people that had pure theatrical models just weren't releasing content. They were either purely selling to streamers or holding their content completely back. And that was also causing a massive problem. So I think if we look back in retrospect, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. It is tipping now into being into a position where it's starting to become more and more problematic, because as we're emerging from the pandemic, it's becoming more of an issue. I think when we enter 2022, I really do think it will stabilize. That all being said, I think having some evolution in this space is good, because I think the constant specter around like the 90-day window, the 90-day window, the 90-day window wasn't good for theaters, and as it relates to the consumer, and the media that surrounds that ends up painting exhibition with a brush that makes the business feel very
right now, I'm just listening to this Zoom conference. But
sorry,
Kurt, you're not muted.
Yeah. But I mean, you run the risk of the industry looking, you know, just intransigent a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that can become problematic ultimately, because consumers are paying attention to it, and I think that can be a little bit problematic. I think fundamentally, though, you know, and I don't, you know, I'm trying to like find the lemonade moments out of COVID, but I do think, like, you know, something like Alamo declaring bankruptcy was like put a chilling effect into consumers and into the press. Like, you realize like the things you truly love, you can't take for granted. The ArcLight closing was like a major blow to the press corps. And it really started to shift everybody's brains a little bit to go, oh wait, like we can't think it's cute that everything's going right to streaming, and we have to actually care a little bit more about the exhibition community and recognize like we actually love these places. We consider these places a part of our home, and we need to have a more thorough worldview of them. And so I kind of feel like as it's all sorted out, everyone got forced to give a little, and and I don't know what else would have made everyone give a little. And in a way, it brought us, I think, to a resolution that I think will keep us sorted for some amount of time, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that I agree. And I definitely, I hope that there's been this kind of come to Jesus moment with a lot of consumers over the past few months with realizing like, oh no, if my movie theater is going to stay open, they need to earn money. And if they're going to earn money, I have to spend money with them. Like, shocking. It's not like Netflix where you just, it's kind of passive and you just, your monthly amount comes out of your banking account and then you just kind of go with it.
Or your parents' banking account.
Yes, or your ex-boyfriend's, or your roommate's cousins, whatever.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and turn it to Kelly now. I know that some of you have been sending questions to Kelly, but if there are other questions, please do DM them to her in the chat box over there. But Kelly, who's up first?
Hi, Megan. So nice to meet you, and excited to have you here with us today. It's your reputation and your persona precedes yourself. And so what I like to do, if it's okay with you, is I like to do a selfie with everyone, or with all our guests. Would it be okay if I did a selfie with you?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to see if I can figure out how to do this. I know if I can pin myself and then do a speaker view, I can see you and me, and then I can take a picture. I'm using a Mac, so I can do the Control-Shift-4, and that will allow, it's Command-Shift-4, and that will allow me to take a selfie. So for anybody that wants to do that, it's add a pin to your picture, go to speaker view. The lovely Megan will be add a pin to her, and you can do a selfie too. So here we go. Smile.
The things we learned during COVID.
There you go. So smile big. Awesome. Thank you so much. Little crazy thing that I do here. And the first one was a total S show, but don't want to cuss because I want to be like Jackie. I don't want to cuss. Or I'm sorry, Patricia. So the first person that asked a question, other than the lovely Theresa, but you answered all her questions, is Cory Schaeffer. So Cory, please unmute yourself.
Oh, I was just asking, this could be for, anyone, but I'm just wondering, you mentioned, surveys, to really understand what is the experience that moviegoers are wanting. And I'm wondering, have we seen a shift? Have there been surveys post COVID, or I guess we're still sort of in it? And what are consumers saying about the experience and what they want? Anyone?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. NRG has been tracking consumer confidence about returning to movies really closely since they started tracking it in early February when the outbreak happened in China. They covered it on a global basis, so it's not just the United States, but there's a lot of attention paid to the United States. And the comfort and excitement about returning to movies is every single week. When you look at research tends to really stabilize and doesn't tend to move, but it is shocking. It moves week after week after week after week, and it sets new records every single week. I think that make sense both with the rollout of vaccines, the comfort level that people have with taking on new activity, timed with the rollout of content. There's still a holdback in the Northeast. That's still where there's like the greatest lag that's happening. And we're kind of digging into that to try and understand what's under the hood of that, because that could be a content piece too, just looking at what movies have come out and thinking about that DMA. And I'm curious if people have other thoughts about that. But I also know that like specific, like, I mean, I don't know if Wanda's on the call, but I know that Cinemark has done a lot of very specific studies around consumer satisfaction right from their earliest openings, and then have been tracking it. And their numbers are really nuts, like 98%, are describe themselves as very satisfied with their experience. Like they had very high numbers of engagement, but that was by design. There was a lot of attention put into, being greeted in the lobby and hand sanitize. There's just a whole lot of energy going into making sure that people feel really safe and really happy and really engaged with while they're in theaters. And it's something we've spent a lot of time talking about.
Megan, thank you so much. Who do we have next, Kelly?
Allison Burns would like to
Allison.
ask your question.
Oh, I liked this question. Allison, do you want to? Is Allison still here? Oh, there she is. Hey.
Yeah, hiya. Really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I'm from Dubai. I look after Novo Cinemas here.
Great.
We are your number one in Dubai.
Yes.
Yeah. So the question is, first of all, I just want to say David King does a great job.
He does.
Please feed that back to him. He's a great.
I will.
Make sure you email him or WhatsApp him and tell him he does a great job. So we're having a lot of the backup content. There's been a lot of content that's backed up. So there's IMAX content that you're used to seeing 2 or 3 weeks, the release window. We're now having week-to-week release windows. But we're getting faced with the studios saying to us that we have to offer them all shows. What's the IMAX position on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're really trying to, as we're working on the network, we're trying to carve out kind of a guarantee of anywhere from 50% to 75% of the network on any given week. In part, and this is, some of my partners are taking some issue with this, but for any movie that's day and date, I view it a little bit as an all bets are off kind of situation. Some of them are incredibly commercial, but the burn rate actually is pretty fast in my view. And having flexibility to be able to program the way you need to program is really important. And I think, particularly now, again, it goes back to serving the customer. If there's the capability to program something during the day and then something different at night, and that's what best programs your theaters to be as financially healthy as possible, also serves the customer in the best possible way, then that's kind of what we need to do right now, because we've all suffered immeasurably over the course of the last, year and a half. And now the time has come where we have to be in service of the customers and by default in service of ourselves. So we're definitely having some very difficult conversations around that. And I think, where it was sort of a real feast, I think, for studios that were releasing movies because they were the only game in town and had 2-week runs on movies or 3-week runs on movies. It's now getting much, much, much more competitive, and we have to be able to have flexibility built into the network for sure. And I understand your pain. I'm in a similar position with a lot of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had the experience here that some distributors are saying that they'll not release in PLF formats because we won't agree to full shows.
Ugh.
They'd be leaving a lot of money on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we all want people just to go to the movie, like that. Literally, all of us want the exact same end result. So somebody has to give.
Yeah, and I know that IMAX have been great at supporting us, and thank you very much for that. You've supported us throughout the COVID as exhibitors, but there needs to be a realization that we can't release all the content at the one time. And if movie performs over another movie, I'll make a choice. I make the choice weekly and say that movie is not being released. I mean, UE and GCC has the great privilege of not having film terms contracts. So I don't have to release anything that I don't want to release, and I can remove anything that I don't want to release. But we're having these emails and these conversations with distributors that just say, you have to guarantee us all shows.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be sustainable over the next few months. Well, Kelly, do we have any other questions? Because if not, I wanted to ask a question kind of based off of something Sandy said that's in the same vein-ish.
Just one more person.
Yep.
And of course, we cannot forget Theresa.
Theresa.
Of course.
Theresa always asks the best questions.
Best questions.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Megan. You already answered several of my questions. I wanted to know if you were going to bring some of your museum content over to the cinema side, and that's obviously something that you're working on, which I think is exciting. But I guess my question is, what's the next big change for IMAX? Do you see that being a physical change to the environment, like within the seating or more social seating, or do you see it as an expanded content, more like a partnership between IMAX and esports, or a different venue similar to that?
Yeah, I think for us, it is about diversification of content. I think that it goes back to this. For me, it makes a lot of sense in that there's deep fanships in when you look at the experience economy over the course of, in the next 8 years, it's supposed to be an $8 trillion economy. We offer one of the best experiences in the world, and there's deep buckets of passion within many of those verticals. Movies will always be our primary focus, but I am very focused on thinking about how does somebody have the greatest night of their life or the greatest afternoon of their life, something that becomes deeply memorable. Because in my view, if somebody can come in and have an unbelievable experience doing something they absolutely love, when they walk out and they see the poster for Top Gun or Shang-Chi, they're much more likely to say, we should come back Friday. Like, I didn't realize that was opening, it's becoming harder and harder as a marketer. I mean, I think the effects of streaming to me have much less effect on movies than people assign it to. I really do think it's the difference of like eating a steak in a restaurant or eating like a burger that you made on your grill. It's like two totally different things. Yes, they're both beef, but like they're different entities. Mm-hmm. But the difference is what it has done is it's really messed with linear television. And that has made marketing a very huge challenge. I have found that movie-going population and even an older population is much less movie literate and a little less aware. Like, they're not pinpointing when movies are opening. They're not tracking the how and when of things. The overwhelming nature of content and the overwhelming nature of when things come out and how they exist in the ether become a game of word of mouth swell. And that becomes, as a marketer, a really scary place to be, because that becomes such a battle for people's attention. And so I think the key is pulling people into that cinema as often as you can. And by definition, if you're only relying on studio movie content, I think that is going to be a bit of a losing game. I think there has to be some diversification in terms of what you're doing. And that also includes documentaries. It also includes things that feel, educational and enriching. I think people are really interested in living their best life, but it means high quality content in a really broad breadth of what that can mean.
And that kind of ties into like Sandy's comment, she said, I think the point about not knowing how long the movie will play for at the theater should be linked to the window in some way. And like, we're having so many big IMAX titles come out, bam, 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 bam. Like Shang-Chi and the 12 Rings or Top Gun Maverick are going to be exclusively theatrical. The Suicide Squad is going day and date. Something else might have a 2-week window. Maybe something that goes day and date, like only plays IMAX for a lesser period of time to make way for something that is exclusively theatrical. Like, I feel like I'm pretty well plugged in, but it's just confusing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you communicate to moviegoers, like when and how and for how long these things are coming out to really eventize it?
Yeah, I think it's a real issue, because I think creating the event is the key. And then, there's the tipping point. I mean, looking at the tracking for Black Widow, you can say, okay, the tracking's great, but what does that actually mean? Because if I'm not the avid Marvel fan, but I'm like the next layer of fan, and I've got 3 boys, and they wake up on Thursday morning and say, I really want to see Black Widow. When can we see Black Widow? And I start to turn my attention to wanting to buy a ticket. And the ticket's not available on Friday. And maybe it's not available at convenient times on Saturday. And Disney Plus is sitting on my television. Like, when do I say convenience is just going to win the day because they really want to see it? And we're going out to dinner on Friday night. Now I have a babysitter that's sitting on my television. Or when do those cross sections of decisions take place? And by the way, if my husband and I were going to watch it with them, are we now not watching it with them? Are we watching it with them? Like, how did that just change the dynamic of what we were always going to do? Because Black Widow without a day and date release was absolutely a ticket we would have bought before, and now it becomes a more muddled decision. So that effect is a really serious effect. And I think for a movie that's not size, like that has a big effect. And you're also talking about a brand that has been delivering consistently great streaming product to the service, because Loki and WandaVision and Captain America and the Falcon, like, these are shows that Marvel fans and young Marvel fans have been consuming now for months. So this movie is a real challenge to get through. I think we're going to publicly celebrate whatever happens. It's going to do a big number. We're going to feel really good about it. But this one is a big challenge, and I'm sure everyone on the call feels the same way. I mean, it's a challenge.
It's been a challenging year, and it'll continue to be challenging. But like you say, 2022, things shaking out. Warner Brothers not going day and date with their stuff. Disney maybe well, I'm not going to say anything about Disney. Disney's good. We love Disney. But anyway, I know that you have a very busy schedule and our hour is up here, but thank you so much, Megan, for joining us. I think it was a great conversation. Thank you to Heather, who, as always, puts everything together, and I'm just kind of stepping in last minute. But Heather, we are all sending positive vibes and positive vitamin C, immune system stuff your way, so you get better.
Get better.
Oh, I feel better.
Absolutely.
But thanks so much to everyone. Hopefully we'll see each other at CinemaCon. There is going to be some sort of we party. We're still firming up the details, but keep your eyes out for that.
And thank you so much, Megan. Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much, Megan. It was
Thank
great.
you.
Sorry for the delay in the beginning.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Heather. Feel better soon.
Oh, I like. That's why I didn't talk.
Bye, guys. See you later.
Bye, everybody.